Hey guys, what's up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So today, as per usual, let's go over the market. Let's go over what has happened so far to Tesla and what we can expect moving forward. So as usual, if you enjoyed, don't forget to hit that like button. This is not financial advice. I am not a financial advisor. And of course, if you're interested in my membership section on YouTube down below where I post information to my members, obviously privately, chart updates, thoughts, and overall on market sentiment, and just all those things combined together live as the stock is moving throughout the trading day. Link is down below, $2.99 a month. But jumping right into a Tesla looking like, actually literally closing just a tad over 3% on the day, putting us at about $242 and some change, which compared to the market, definitely a bit of an underperformance for Tesla overall, showing some pretty decent weakness. And yeah, so there's a few things to talk about, right? So, I mean, overall, we're still trading roughly within that same range, right? That kind of the 240s really in general. And there's a few things to talk about here, right? There's still technically some bullishness potential here. Again, as I've said many times, I still think the bearish potential is still higher than the bullish potential, and that hasn't changed. I still believe that. But with that being said, there is potential there, or still rather, for some bullish reaction at this level right here. So let's start with the bullish side first. It's a bit of a shorter side, so we'll get that out of the way first. So let's talk about that, right? So first and foremost, most important thing to me right now is the fact that let's open up the, where is it? The volume by price, right? Most important thing to me right now is, we are still, we're technically below this volume here, but, ultimately, pretty much as long as you're above 240 to 242, right? That's the way I look at it, right? Kind of exactly to where we bounced over here, right? This bounce was exactly at 240 point and a half really, right? So as long as we're above essentially this line right here-ish, right? Which is again, between 240 to 242, as long as we're holding that level and we haven't broke down below that just yet, to me, Tesla is still bearish, honestly. It still looks not great, but it's not truly confirmed to go a step lower until that level breaks, right? And as I've said that many times, as long as this level is held, I still personally think that there is a very real possibility that we get a bit of a bullish reaction from this kind of 240 to 242 level. I don't think it's the best thing, and I personally wouldn't completely and utterly bet on it like it's like a guaranteed thing, but it's a possibility that you shouldn't ignore, is essentially what I'm trying to say. That's number one. That level is holding, which is the last line or the last resort, if you will, for this kind of low volume area, right? It's on thin ice, so it's absolutely on thin ice, but still technically holding. The second thing is, of course, going to be the fact that, let me go ahead and remove this quickly. Right, the fact that it's a little iffy. I'm not gonna lie, it's looking a little bit weird, but there's still technically a possibility for a potential little bit of a double bottom situation here, where we come down like this, right? So we come down here, and then of course we get a bit of a rally up like this, and then we come back down to roughly the same level once again, kind of like this, and then from there, of course, we make our way up even higher, right? That is still technically a possibility. Actually, I could just use this. I don't know why I'm doing that, right? Something like this, right? There's still technically a possibility, right? It's looking a little bit wonky, right? But again, even if this were to play out, keep in mind, even in theory, if this pattern were to play out, which is a bullish pattern, double bottom, it's a very kind of very small time frame pattern, right? It's not a massive double bottom. It's not some crazy one that'll give us to some insane rally to like 300. It's a small one. And if it does play out, by the way, the validation, the invalidation is if we fall essentially below 240. The validation for this pattern to play out is, again, also holding that 240 to 242, but more importantly, breaking above around, 250 to 252, somewhere in that range right there, right? You want to be breaking this kind of neckline right here that we, have got rejected at several times. If we can break above that, this pattern gets validated, and I do think that we're going to get a bit of a rally, probably somewhere to like the 265-ish range, somewhere around there. Nothing too crazy, right? It's not going to be, again, a massive pattern, not a huge double bottom situation happening here, but I wouldn't be surprised if we get a rally somewhere up to there. So that's it. But honestly, that's pretty much the only bullish thing I can think of right now for Tesla. There's not a whole lot more, in all honesty, with, I believe, CPI coming out tomorrow as well. That could be a factor as well, which just affects the whole market. So keep that in mind. Now, moving over to the bearish sides, there's definitely a lot more bearishness here than bullishness. Now, the bearishness is quite simply the fact that, number one, we did break out of this channel, right? I made this channel yesterday talking about how this could be the handle for the overall cup and handle pattern that we talked about just yesterday, right? Being, of course, this is the cup right here. Clearly, that's not so far happening, right? It's still technically a possibility. This doesn't have to be this, specific situation here, right? We're still technically forming that cup and handle pattern as long as we don't break also again below that 240 to 242 level. You can see how important that level is, right? As long as we don't break below that, technically the cup and handle pattern can still form right off of this bounce right here. So for instance, if CPI is, maybe good tomorrow and the market rallies off of it or something of the sort, right? That could be, of course, still beautiful validation forward. But as you can see, we did kind of start forming a bit of a channel that we did did fall below here, which of course, further went into a bigger sell-off to close the day off, right? Which we did close essentially at the lows of the day, which isn't great to see. But as long as we don't break below 240, this pattern technically can still play out, and we can start forming the handle roughly from here, which again, as I talked about many times, if we do start forming the handle of the cup itself here, which would be a short-lived bounce, essentially almost like a dead cat bounce, which again, very possible. Definitely don't want to completely ignore it. It would bring us up to somewhere around, 263 to as high as 277, anywhere in that range. Could also be only 270, but these three main points of the Fibonacci are the main ones I'll be looking at. Now, that's of course a very large if at the very moment, right? So that's number one. Number two, going to the daily, of course, we can see that Tesla RSI still looking quite atrocious, still making bearish divergences, still not looking great. The MACD is still looking quite bearish, not showing really any obvious signs of a potential flip to bullishness yet, not looking great at all, right? The only thing that's looking potentially good is the pivot here. You can see it is starting to show some pretty massive, bars to the downside, which usually means that we're approaching some form of bottom. There's a potential maybe we just, get some stop losses triggered under 240, gap fill to the 235-ish, maybe even tomorrow, and then from there get a bit of a rally, right? That is a possibility. I'm sure people have a lot of stop losses just shy of 240. I would not be surprised, honestly, people have a bunch of stop losses just shy of 240. That would not surprise me whatsoever, right? Because a lot of people are probably looking like, okay, well, if this level breaks, then there's not a lot of volume. We're probably gonna get a massive sell-off. I'll put a stop loss at like 239 or 238. And maybe that gets triggered, we gap fill, and then we rally. And then a lot of people are gonna be, FOMOing back in, right? That's also a possibility. The market loves to do those kind of things. They love triggering those stop losses, man. I'm telling you, it's just a thing. That's why I personally never use them, but I'm always watching myself. So keep in mind, that's another possibility, right? And again, even if we do get some form of rally, there's still just so much resistance above us, as I've said many times. If we come up to to these levels that previously acted as a support, it'll now of course act as a resistance, right? We have the 250s, then we have the 255s, then we have the 260 to 262, then we have the dreaded 267 to 270, then we have the dreaded 280. There is so much resistance to go back up through for Tesla to really get any meaningful rally. And that's not even including, of course, the 50-day moving average, the 21 EMA, all right above us. All of those are massive resistances, which will prove to be pretty difficult. And unless there is some major catalyst, like maybe CPI tomorrow, and of course Tesla with the market itself will rally. But other than that, especially if CPI is bad tomorrow, this is going to get pretty ugly pretty fast. But if CPI is good tomorrow, maybe that's it. But there's no obvious catalyst for Tesla that can really propel it, in my opinion, very, very soon, right? Like Cybertruck or like the Highland potential, where there's still rumors about the Highland, right? If that's even a thing, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, right? I don't see that happening anytime soon. That's probably still at least a month away, if not maybe even 2 to 3 months away, right? You know what I mean? So it's gonna be pretty rough, in my opinion, next, 30, 60 days. I don't think it's gonna be anything too eventful, personally. On top of that, another thing to pay attention to is, of course, the index, right? QQQ in this case, for instance, you can see at the very bottom of the channel that it has been rallying in for quite a while now, ever since really March of 13th, roughly. Maybe even like February, late February, early March, right? It's been forming this channel, just completely rocketing way back up. We can see it's at the very bottom of the channel, and it's also just barely below the 50-day moving average. It's already got below the 21 EMA. Now it's below the 50-day moving average. Not a convincing close below it, and it's still holding within the channel. But with CPI coming out tomorrow, it is truly hanging on some thin, or a thin thread, if you will. Standing on some extremely thin ice here. And if this collapses down below and really starts to break down, then it's gonna be pretty ugly. And of course, that's most likely going to bring Tesla down with it as well. So that's something else, in my opinion, that's important to pay attention to as well. Another thing I'm sure a lot of people are probably thinking about is like the short interest. Okay, maybe there's a short squeeze for Tesla. Maybe Tesla will just rally off of some short squeeze, maybe after CPI, right? But if you open up this right here at the very bottom, you can see this is a short volume from FINRA. Nothing too crazy, man. We're pretty much in line with just the kind of how it's usually is, for the most part, for the longest while now. It's not low, but it's not high. It's not anything to really write home about, right? The short interest you can see over here, right? So I don't know if I would really rely on a short squeeze personally. Nothing too crazy as well. So there's really not a whole lot of positiveness, if you will, for Tesla. We have the Bollinger Bands, right, which we are, of course, now hugging the red line. Remember, we talked about hugging the green line, and will at the very least come down to the white line, which is the average. Well, now you can see they're finally expanding, and unfortunately, they seem to be expanding to the downside, which isn't very good as well, right? That's not what you really want to be seeing. And of course, like we talked about earlier, when we were squeezing over here with this squeeze meter or indicator, if you will, right? The red dots imply that there's a built up momentum. And you can see it did finally execute, and it is going down towards the downside, right? Which we did talk about how it's looking like. And you can go back to those videos. We talked about these red dots. We talked about how it's looking like it's going to go to the downside. That's exactly what's happening. And so far, it's not really showing any obvious signs of stopping or really, stopping the bleeding really just yet for Tesla. Again, the last resort for the bulls, in my opinion, is really holding on to this 240. This 240 breaks, I think things can get a little bit ugly pretty fast. And as I talked about to my members, we'll go over here. Overall, the main thing that you want to be looking at is, of course, going to be these levels for the downside, right? We have the 235 gap fill. Then we have, of course, the 220s, which is where the volume by price, right? You can see here really starts to finally pick up a little bit here, but especially in the 210s, which is also where it starts to pick up. But the 220s is the 0.5 Fibonacci, I believe it was. And the 210s roughly is the 0.618 Fibonacci as well, from the swing high to the swing low, assuming the bullish trend is still intact. And also, don't forget, I did talk about this many, many times as well. But on the weekly, right, we still haven't really retested this overall breakout on the something like this, I believe it was, right? We haven't really tested out this overall breakout, right? When we broke out of the situation right here, something like this, right? We haven't really tested this, right? This is about, taking us to 210-ish. We haven't retested it. We broke out and pretty much just ran right past it and haven't came back to retest that. So ideally, what I would personally really want to see is come down somewhere close to this area, retest this, which is also where the 50-day moving average is. And then from there, I think we can get a beautiful rally. We're actually below the 100-day moving average on the weekly chart. But, we can come down, retest this overall blue line breakout that we had, several weeks ago. And then from there, I think we can ideally hold, which will also be essentially a nice little retest of this kind of resistance and support area before right here, which now, of course, turns into support, which is also around 210. And I think from there, we'll get a beautiful rally. And I think, starting October and probably especially November to December should be pretty nice and pretty bullish overall. But with that being said, that's what I am seeing right now, guys. Let me know what you think down below. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you for the next one. Peace.